Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross, back with Tom Ricks. He's best known for his book Fiasco, about the war in Iraq. He followed that with the book The Gamble, General David Petraeus and the military adventure in Iraq. Rick's new book is called The Generals, American Military Command from World War II to Today. He covered the military for the Washington Post from 2000 to 2008. Ricks is now a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security. I remember we talked several times during the Iraq War when we had troops there, and you kept saying there are no good alternatives. It's a question of which is the least bad. Do you feel the same way about Afghanistan now in terms of the options facing the United States?
I kind of do. And just as Iran, I think, was a long-term worry in Iraq, I think Pakistan is the long-term worry in Afghanistan. Afghanistan by itself, I think, has sort of had its problems. Afghanistan with Pakistan on its doorstep wanting to control events in Afghanistan, that's a much harder case. Pakistan strikes me as the biggest problem in the world right now, much more than Iran. Pakistan is a country that seems to be on the edge of falling apart, that already has well over 100 nuclear weapons by best estimates, and seems to be drifting towards extremism. So I think Pakistan is a real problem, and as long as it's next door to Afghanistan, it's going to make trouble in Afghanistan. That's what gives me real pessimism about Afghanistan these days.
You have a list that you wrote about a year ago and that you reprinted recently when you were on a break. It was a kind of like rerun on your blog.
Yeah, I went into summer reruns on the blog.
Yeah, so it was a list of 19 things that many insiders and vets of Afghanistan agree to be true about the war there, but that generals can't say in public. And number one on that list was Pakistan is now an enemy of the U.S.
I think it is. But just because a country isn't your enemy, you don't necessarily need to say so if you're an official. And I really think that's what our policy is now. If you look at President Obama and the people around him, the way they deal with Pakistan, they're really holding it at arm's length. They're not talking about it being an ally in the war against terror. They're managing it with the sense that, hey, in the short term, we need to kind of, talk nice about these guys, but in the long term, we're getting a divorce.
If Pakistan is becoming the enemy or is the enemy of the United States, what are the implications of that, especially since they do have nuclear weapons?
Well, there are two major implications for us. One is what we do in Afghanistan. It makes it much more difficult extricating ourselves from Afghanistan and hoping that it is relatively okay after we leave. The second thing is India. It gives us a natural reason to be allied with India, in addition to other reasons like that India is a democracy, that India is a very large and important country, and India has a burgeoning information technologies industry. So there's a lot of good reasons for us to be allied with India. The funny thing is India is not quite so sure it wants to start going steady with us. I think India is a little bit worried that the United States is not the best partner in the world to have at this point. And it's doing quite well on its own, and it doesn't necessarily want to forge a close alliance with the United States.
So getting back to Afghanistan for a second, what do you think are the possibilities for what happens after we pull out of Afghanistan in 2014, which is what President Obama wants to do if he's reelected?
I think it's possible that after we leave Afghanistan, that you could get some sort of stalemate, some sort of nervous ceasefire in Afghanistan that allows the country to move forward. I think that both the Kabul government under Karzai, or his successor, and the Taliban could find their way to some sort of living with each other. My worry, though, is that Pakistan will undercut that Pakistan will again back the Taliban and again attack the Kabul government. I think you could see Pakistan really undercutting the situation in Afghanistan, but I think also they've been doing this for several years now, playing a double game there, backing the Taliban. I remember talking to an American official who said that starting in about 2005, when it was clear that the Americans were very busy with Iraq, that Pakistan started coming back into Afghanistan and helping out the Taliban again. And I think they'll just intensify that after we go. But there are ways of helping the Kabul government counter that. And I think we're going to end up stuck in Afghanistan doing those sort of small missions that help them out, fighting basically people supported by Pakistan.
The issue of defense spending has been coming up, both in terms of the fiscal cliff and sequestration, and also in terms of the presidential campaign. When you look at the defense budget, what do you see, and do you think it needs more money, or how much do you think it can afford to be cut?
I think you could cut a lot of money from the defense budget. I don't know whether it's 10 or 20 or 30%. Right now we have a U.S. military that really is not very good at spending money. Since 9/11, they've just had a fire hose of cash turned on them, almost like, here's the cash, figure out how to spend it. And in military terms, 10 or 15 years is a generation. So we got a generation of officers who have never actually had to live with any austerity at all, or even had to think about things about maybe there's a cheaper, better way to do this. Maybe this second way of doing it is not quite as effective, but it's 1/10 the cost.